I couldn't be happier to introduce our first speaker, Dean Daphne Terrace of the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada. She's a trusted member of our industrial relations and human resources community here in Canada, and she blends the academic contributions well with meaningful practice applications. And I think all of our attendees who have varied interests and different career paths ahead of them will appreciate. She's previously served as Dean of the Edwards School of Business at the University of Saskatchewan from 2010 to 2016. Dean Terrace has been active at the intersection of labor relations, public policy, and law, with a particular interest in bringing multiple disciplines together on important labor market and workplace issues. She was expert advisor to the Federal Commission on Employment Standards, a member of the Saskatchewan Minister of Labor's Advisory Council, and chaired the Educational Relations Board of Saskatchewan. Dean Terrace received her undergraduate degree from York University and earned a master's from Duke University, both in political science. She holds an MBA in new ventures and entrepreneurship, a PhD in labor relations from the University of Calgary, and has an LLM in labor and employment law from Osgoode Hall Law School. Wow, she loves education as much as we do, truly. So Dean Terrace has some remarks which she'll deliver for the next 15 minutes or so, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. And thanks to all the students that submitted questions in advance, we have those. You can also submit questions through the chat box. It's accessible on your screen. You can just press the chat function and it should pop up on one side. And you can submit questions there. And apologies in advance if we can't get your questions. So over to you, Dean Terrace. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, you all. I'm looking at whatever faces I can see. Oh, thank you for the waves. Yes, I want the session to be as interactive as possible. So please make use of technology. If I say something great, give me a thumbs up. If I say something really awful, you have no chance to comment except the chat, because the technology only allows you to clap or give you a thumbs up, but like there's no, miserable faces on this technology. We would say there's response bias or something, if we're, okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about was really simple, and I'm hoping that the question and answer session will be very pertinent to you. I wanted to talk about what it feels like to be a PhD student or a master's student going into the PhD program. And I want to tell you that there are hard times because adulthood is hard. And so I'm going to start with a few things that I noticed when I many times have reflected on what it takes for a PhD student to survive, to thrive, to go on to become a successful academic. So from the heart, here it is. I oversaw about 60 PhD students in my time. I didn't supervise all of them, but I oversaw their development as director of the PhD program. And it is a fact of life that at the age where people are doing graduate school, crap happens to them. Whether it's failed marriage, broken relationship, a death of a parent, a sibling, problems with children. I mean, there is never a time that there are not emergencies. And that is normal within a program. And people come to the PhD director and they say, I've had a problem, I need to take an incomplete in a course. So I would say, so let's play this game. You have a child who has chicken pox, and it's a raging case of chicken pox. Right now I could talk about pandemic, but I would rather use chicken pox. And you come to the PhD director and you say, I've fallen behind in my work. I can't even sleep. My kid is up screaming and itching all night. I need to take an incomplete. And someone like me says, okay, what's your plan? And you say one of two things. Either you say, plan, like I'm exhausted, I don't know when my kid's going to get better, and the second one showing symptoms, this is a really awful time, I don't know what do you mean plan? That's student number one. Student number two says, I've already checked with the course coordinator. I will hand the work in exactly 1 month. Here's how much delayed I am, and here's what I'm going to do to catch up. Well, it has been my experience that student one will not finish, or will finish and never go on to a very good career, because life always happens. You see me right now in the middle of a move. I could easily have said, I can't do this. You can't be student one. You have to be student two. And if you're looking for the academic grounding of what I'm talking about, it's called locus of control. Students, in order to thrive in a profession that has slippery deadlines, you know, you're using conferences as deadlines, you're using courses as deadlines, but the higher up you get in this profession, the more the deadlines are up to you. So we call those slippery deadlines. You know, if it's a week late to submit an article to a journal, it's a week, it doesn't matter. The journal, it doesn't have you on a clock. So you have to have a fierce internal locus of control. So I could tell almost immediately the first time there was an incident or an episode or something that seriously kicked a student off track, I could tell who was going to thrive and who was not. And so, you know, I could see it early. The other thing is, so that's one tip, is look deeply within yourself and see if you have the drive for this occupation. This occupation is a calling. We are extremely privileged to be able to have the freedom to research what we want. We're extremely privileged to set our own hours. There is no better occupation. I do not regret for 1 second becoming an academic, but I have seen a lot of academics fail. And you don't know often as a student, because the office sizes have not changed since in 200 years. Professors still have the same office, and a really distinguished professor often has the same office as a not distinguished professor. So there's a sense that the public has that all professors are similar, and they are not. The ones you want to align yourself with are the ones that will drive you forward. And there's a lot of, am I allowed to swear? Like, we're in a field that swearing is just technical terms. Academics are capable of the most extraordinary bullshit. And I can tell you this as a dean. It is unbelievable how people fake that they are good researchers. And the only way you know is to really thoroughly examine people's CVs. Did they launch? Do they get funds? What networks have they had? And because everyone has learned to talk the talk. Everybody knows you do not finish a PhD if you have not learned to talk the talk. But it's only after a few years that you figure out whether you actually do the walking or the sprinting. And so, you know, just be very wary of who you align yourself with. I know somebody had a question about mentorship and so on. Be extremely careful, because some people, some professors really think that it's a measure of status to have a PhD student. And so they really want a PhD student. They want a few PhD students, but they're not necessarily capable of giving you the kind of direction and mentorship. And in the dreams of a professor who is less productive than they should be, if only I had a PhD student, I would be more productive. And that is crap, okay? Absolute crap. PhD students, actually for senior professors, initially lessen productivity, because there's a lot of interaction that goes on. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of hours spent with them. I could spend my hours working with a senior colleague and have a higher chance of getting something into a top-tier publication than the hundreds of hours I spend with graduate students. It eventually pays off. But in the short run, it does not increase a person's productivity. And yet, there are people that are trying to entice you into their fold in order that their productivity increase. And so be very wary, take the advice of other professors, figure out who's worth being supervised by. And really spend a lot of time thinking about who your supervisor should be. It doesn't matter if they ask you really, really good questions, about deep questions. That doesn't really matter, because the dissertation is just the union ticket. So my next point, I'm sort of leaving a story. The dissertation, which everybody focuses on, is the baby start to a difficult career, a wonderful career, but a difficult career. And the only good dissertation, as they say, is a done dissertation. The dissertation will not be your life's work. The dissertation is just a springboard. So get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect. My experience in labor relations, I had a 400 or 500 page dissertation. I thought that was normal. I was wrong. It could have been a lot shorter. But within my dissertation were 5 pages that made my career. It wasn't the 400 pages or 500, whatever it was like, weighed me down. But within it was a scintillating 5-page set. And that actually launched my career in non-union employee relations. So I put the whole dissertation aside, which probably was a mistake. I should have published more from it. But I focused in on a finding. So just get the dissertation done, because that frees you up for your career. I don't know how to say it. The other thing that happens with dissertations is that there are many peaks and valleys, okay? And it's almost predictable. So at first, your topic, you have a real high when you figure out your topic. And with regard to figuring out your topic, choose a significant topic. It's as difficult to do a significant topic as a really insignificant topic. So make sure your topic is at the start of a wave. You're not just doing a replication study. You're really deeply immersed in something that is relevant to the field. So it's frustrating when I see people, you're going to spend that amount of your life doing something insignificant. So test the significance of your topic, because that's what launches you. So you get to a high where you've got a topic, you feel it's significant, you go to conferences, you're extremely proud of what your potential is. And then you go into a trough where, it's so complicated, and what methods are you going to do, and and the writing of it without the same deadlines as courses. The writing of it with slippery deadlines is really tough. And then you go into a predictable, you do a surge because your supervisor starts losing faith that you're going to actually write anything. So you have a surge and you do the first 3 chapters, and then you have a trough again. And then before you finish, there actually can be quite a deep trough, and then a sense of desperation. And that actually will carry you. The most difficult work is the last peak that takes you to the completion of the dissertation. And there is no way to make it easier. There is no substitution for hard work. I tried to do myself, and everybody has to figure out what works for them. But what works for you? Watch what works for you, because that probably will be the pattern that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. So do you work with a sense of urgency because you need a deadline? Do you work because you do 3 hours a day every single day? Everybody has a different MO. For me, my MO, my modus operandi was just pure desperation. I had to get it finished because it weighed on me. And I set a meaningful date for the completion of my entire draft, and that was Labor Day. Because you can use a little humor in your life. It could be the date of your father's passing so that you commemorate. If choose a meaningful day and then kill yourself to get there, right? That is your day. There is no excuse. You will have your dissertation done that day. And so I handed it in on Labor Day, and my supervisor joked with me that we'll schedule the dissertation defense on the Day of Atonement in the Jewish calendar, which was sort of a joke because I can't work on the Day of Atonement. And then maybe I will get whatever revisions done by Thanksgiving. But, you know, like you can have some humor there in setting deadlines. One last thing that I want to say that I think is important for you to hear from someone like a dean. If you're choosing an academic career, start positioning yourself for tenure while you're still a PhD student. And when you get your first tenure track job, you should be thinking about how you're going to be a full professor. The careers that really, really do well are the ones that start intensely early, and the hockey stick lift. Every professor in every office is their own entrepreneur. You know, so universities are incubation centers for entrepreneurs. And every one of you is a potential entrepreneur in your own career management. So you sit in an office and you should be highly ambitious. Like you should be, it's okay to be grotesquely competitive and highly ambitious as long as you are not destructive or lack compassion or have no emotional intelligence. You can be a driven person because this is not a normal career. And so I often, as a senior woman in leadership, one of the few female deans of a big business school, I'm often asked, how do I achieve work-life balance? Well, I am not your role model for work-life balance. There is no work-life balance for people who really super duper achieve. They try, but something's got to give. And I don't regret my intensity. I've raised kids. I need you to know that I've raised kids. I'm not one of those like monk-like academics. I've had relationships. I've raised kids. I've done all kinds of things. But my diet is not good. I rarely exercise. I would rather read a book in bed than hike. And so it's okay to be yourself. And don't put the additional pressure on yourself that you must do everything every day well. It's okay to intensify. And I'm talking mostly to women here because women are super pressured that way. It's okay to let go of some things in order to have a bit of a compensatory model in your life because it really matters how you launch your academic career. And that's my learning. And I became gray from thinking these deep thoughts. So I want to turn to your questions. I mean, other people will say, don't listen to her, she's too intense. Well, listen to me because I'm intense.
Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. Very honest and motivating and scary. And so thank you.
It's a great career. Don't be too scared. It's a great career. It's a great career, but you have to pay the piper.
Yeah. And wonderful. Okay, so we'll invite students if you want to put some live questions. If that stirred up some of the juices, you can put those in the chat box as well. But I'll go to some of the questions that were sent in advance. Actually, I think you've answered a lot of them.
I tried to weave them a little bit.
I think you touched on a lot of them. Lots of questions about careers. One of the questions I wanted to ask from the list was, how do you make decisions about which opportunities you do pursue and which ones you pass on?
I learned a few things. I'll give you a few tips. If you don't want to do it tomorrow, don't say yes to doing it because someone's asking you to do it next year. So there's this time discounting that goes on. You have to be interested. You can't just say, oh, well, I guess I'll do it in a year. Because otherwise, in a year, you will be facing stuff that you don't like to do. So be careful, learn to say no. No is a complete sentence. It is okay. People will always ask you to do things. And what you have to do is rehearse how to say no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so overcommitted. I really think that's an important thing you're asking me to do, but I cannot in good faith get it done. So I would really appreciate if you go on to the next person on your list. And you know what? There is a list they have. And they forget that you said it's okay to say no. So rehearse how to say no, because you'll need that early in your career. Because you won't be resilient enough to say no the way senior professors say no. So you're going to kind of learn to do it. I always look for 2 furs or 3 furs. 3 for the price of 1, 2 for the price of 1. So I like to, if I'm doing a conference presentation, I want to make sure that I can also use it in my class. I also want to make sure that I can use it as the basis of an article. So I'm always looking for multiple ways of using the same amount of work, because otherwise I would not have been able to survive my career. So it's okay to repurpose. I'm not telling you to self-plagiarize. And I'm not telling you to cheat. I'm telling you to be very strategic about what you spend deep time on. And the final thing is, and I said it in my opening remarks, it's just as easy to do significant things as insignificant things. So ask yourself, is this significant? It's got to be significant.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. I see we have a question in our chat box from Yushnish. How does the COVID-19 pandemic affect academic jobs? There's some concern about many universities freezing hiring. So can you share a little bit about what you've noticed, please?
Well, yes. And I'll tell you that I'm one of the deans that is counter-cyclical to market. So I deliberately seek talent when other people are closing doors. So believe it or not, I have hired 36 tenure track professors in the last year and a half. I just finished hiring 20 this year, and half of them were hired during the pandemic. So we can do interviews during the pandemic, we can meet people, we check references, it has not stopped our hiring at all. On the other hand, what's happened is, and not necessarily because of the pandemic, but it's been blamed on the pandemic, the United States has really retrenched hiring because states have been having trouble providing money to universities. There's real serious budgetary issues. The pandemic is not going to create as serious budgetary issues unless a school is very, very dependent on international students. And, serves them right for developing an appetite. Sorry, but if you take international students, you have a moral responsibility to give them high quality education and mentor them well and get them out in the job market. They're not to be used as cash cows. And so a lot of the universities that became very dependent on international students did it to substitute for the weaknesses of their own model, their own budget model. And so they're the ones that are having trouble and freezing hiring. The budget situation for industrial relations it's very interesting because there are a huge number of retirements happening in labor relations. And those retirements will open up opportunities. The problem for you in your field, and I'm being very realistic, but also a little bit depressing. The problem is whenever a department in business, and business is maybe 50 to 60% of all the hiring of labor relations now, may not be the case in other countries, but certainly in North America, it's the business schools that are the funnel into academic careers for labor relations, for industrial relations, employment relations. But the IO psychologists, industrial organizational psychologists, and HR people have figured out the formula to publishing in top quality journals. And there's a formula. And so they're very attractive on the job market because they already have 2 or 3 top tier publications. They already have competitive research grants. And it's almost like a cookie cutter approach. And it's the labor relations people who sometimes, you know, you're deep thinkers and you have potential, but you haven't been mentored yet to just achieve in a way that translates to a very, very desirable candidate. Labor relations tends to go to too many conferences and produce too little publication in relation to the conference. So another little rule of thumb I have is for every 3 conferences you go to, get 1 publication. Please stop throwing your work at conferences without having the deliverables, and aim pretty high. Because it's my experience with top tier journals is the editorial board, the editors and the reviewers are very, very competent. If you go to 2nd and 3rd tier reviews, it's a crapshoot. And it's the strangest thing. So sometimes the top tier journals provide very good feedback. They always, you know, they reject. 90% of all work going in is rejected. But if you get a revise and resubmit with very good comments, you can work with them. So don't be afraid. Do I think long-term structure? I don't know. 10 years ago, MOOCs were massive online open enrollment kind of courses were talked about as the wave of the future. And they did not catch on. And the reason, and they've been a spectacular failure, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people register, but very few people complete. And if you complete 1 massive online course, can you really do a 40-course degree from your basement? I mean, do you have the persistence and the resilience, all of the attributes that I was talking about PhD students having to do your work this way? I think technology is improving hugely, but you still need, if a professor is an orchestra conductor, you still need the orchestra conductor to, you know, cue in Jan, back up Evelyn, you know, bring this research in, the wisdom of selecting what to do, when to do it, and the technology is improving hugely. But professors are still needed to curate. I don't know if we need quite as many in the introductory classes, but I would rather, to be quite honest, I would rather have, how do I put it? I have 78 sections of introductory accounting in my business school, 78 sections. And we're not talking about sections of 20 students. We're talking about sections of 100, 150 students, 78 sections. Wouldn't I rather have the best online experience with consistency from section to section than trust 78 different people to teach intro accounting? But where there's no substitute is the senior level classes and graduate school. So I don't know yet, the pandemic. I know that it's caused professors who are the most risk averse people in the universe to suddenly pivot and embrace new technologies that they knew they should have been doing years ago. And now they're feeling a little confident, you know, they're a little cocky about it. This may open up huge opportunities for students from distance to share to, you know, we're thinking of it as a possible problem, but I see it as a huge opportunity. Maybe I could make smaller senior level classes in exchange for these big high-tech things. So I'm actually much more inclined to see it as an opportunity.
Well, wonderful. I feel like we could sit here and talk to you for another 40 minutes and just keep asking questions. And
well, okay, well, you're asking questions, but here's something, labor relations. I said this earlier in a ILERA, an ILERA session. This is an unbelievable time to be studying social mobilization, organizing. This is an unbelievable time to take your labor relations toolkit and move it from unions to social movements to, what's going on with Black, Indigenous, what's going on with discrimination. Why are you being sort of put into a little box where you're going to study union mobilization, organizing, when you have the most useful toolkit to study social mobilization? So one of the things that I did in my career, and I hope I inspire you to think this way, I noticed that there were a lot more non-union workers than union workers. Like, really? And this was at a time where it was labor relations. We didn't use the word employment relations. It was labor relations. Everything was union management relations. Our entire field, nobody studied non-union workers. And I said, I'm going to take my labor relations toolkit and I'm going to study what is social mobilization and worker representation in non-union settings. And it was a dangerous thing to do at the time because it was anti the ideology of our field. So people thought I was union busting, which was not true. I was taking our toolkit and applying it to a new setting. And now it's just like everybody talks about what's going on with non-union workers. But at the time I did it, it was very difficult. And people turned their backs on me at conferences. But this is a time where you could take what you learn in labor relations and apply it to what you're seeing with the pandemic, organize work at home. Are people really going to go back to the office 5-6 days a week? Like, really? So this is a great time to study change and help people. In our field, we talk about finding your equilibrium, or work, what's it called? Wage effort bargain. For those of you who know the sort of classic equity theory and wage effort bargain, and people find an equilibrium and then they lock in. Right now, the entire world's equilibrium is open. So before the pandemic, we had Zoom, or we would do PeopleSoft, or we would do Salesforce. We would create a technological system. And if there was Zoom bombing before the pandemic, people would say Zoom doesn't work, and they would abandon Zoom. During the pandemic, there was Zoom bombing, and people said, oh, I can figure out how to make it stop. And we now continue using the technology that I guarantee you we would have resisted had our wage effort bargain not opened up completely. And so what a time to study identity, to study social networking, interactions, all of the methodologies. All of the methodologies are open to you. This is the best time ever to do cool work, like cool work.
yeah, I think that's a perfect place to cap it off. I think that's a great message for us, and thank you. So apologies if we didn't get to all the questions.
I tried. You got a taste of what I would have answered those questions.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, you touched on a lot, and thank you so much for your very honest and very raw look at what's going on and what we should plan for in the future, and to motivate us to
flip to a positive frame. If I could tell you how you will figure out what is significant, relevant, and doable right now. Labor relations people, all academics, the first time you say something negative in class, someone taps you on the shoulder and says, oh, you've got what it takes to be a PhD student. Like, you're so smart, you just critiqued something. So we're always critiquing, we're always in the negative. And so flip the pandemic over and look at it as opportunities, look at it as scintillating, interesting. I know it's been devastating. So let me just say, you know, I understand that people are dying, but what an incredible opportunity it is if you say, I'm going to flip over my reflexively negative self, my reflexively academic negative critiquing self, and find what's positive, and you'll find cool stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Chen. Thanks, Alicia. I mean, I wish you so much success.
Thank you.
You are the future.
Thank you.
I am the past.
No, you're the future. So as a token of our appreciation, we're arranging a delivery of fresh coffee beans to your home from Coffeecology. Well, you can pick which home. We'll do the new
My
home.
new home.
Okay.
It's a housewarming gift. Yay.
Great. So these beans are ethically sourced and delivered by electric vehicles. So thank you so much again. I think we'll all give you our own thumbs up and applause. This is a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us to hear from you. Yeah, and can't wait to see all the great things.
Oh, look at all these hands. I love it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. So we'll turn it over to Shannon, or actually Alicia, right? Alicia, not Shannon, Alicia, sorry, who will lead us over to our next activity. And she's got prizes, freebies to give out, courtesy of our sponsor. So thank you, Dean Terrace. Really appreciate it. Your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thanks, Jen. So I hope everyone